The bottom line is this. Referring to UK cities or London as non-English is a key point here. Britishness is not determined by the colour of our skin.
Okay, the first switch of British for English. Neither John Cleese nor anybody else said anything about Britishness equating with skin colour.
I am British. I'm not less British than John Cleese because I'm black. The Britishness that we experience is it's not segregation.
John Cleese is blurred out. He's too edgy to be shown in focus.
And what is it about Britishness that is not represented in any of our UK cities? Is it our government institutions? Is it our values? Is it our love of football? Is it the food or the royal family? All of that is celebrated. So how are we not English?
Okay, the second switch of British for English. Everyone loves football, so everyone is British. It's kind of glib to reduce Englishness to a love of football and the royal family. Do you have to be a monarchist to be English? No. Do you have to like football? No, not really.
So by referring to it as not English, you have to ask him, what do you mean by not English?
What do you mean by not English? Excellent question, and also a trap. Any definition that might not include absolutely everybody who wants to join in, you're going to be in trouble.
Well, he does go on to clarify, and just to say at the end of it, he was making a point about Brexit, wasn't he? Because he's a Brexiteer, and at the end of it, he said it's also worth noting that London was one of the most Remain places, i.e.
But what he's suggesting is not a very English thing to do.
Well, he went on to say, didn't he?
It's ignorant. In response to John Cleese noting how London bucked the trend of the rest of the UK, in that it didn't vote in large numbers for Brexit. In fact, it voted against Brexit. That's simply a fact. Make of it what you will. London didn't vote for Brexit in the same way that generally the rest of the country did. So what part of noticing that is ignorant? Moving on.
He went against some of the criticism, and he said actually it's not about racism, it's about culturalism, and he said that it's not as polite as it was, humorous, it's not as friendly as it was, those sorts of things.
That
is what he was
such
saying.
Nonsense. This is a man who left the UK because it's full of foreigners and moved to a foreign country to become an immigrant. Please, let's not take him seriously.
He moved to another country. Let's not take him seriously. Okay, let's disregard anything any immigrant says regarding their country of origin. Once they've gone, they don't get any say in anything back home or back in the place they came from. Also, falsely equating John Cleese's situation as like an old retiree individually moving to another country for his retirement, presumably with a lot of money to spend there, with mass migration into London, UK, anywhere. Like, make of mass migration what you like. Whether you love it or hate it, it's not the same as Mr. John Cleese going to the tropics for a bit of sun.
It's not about race. What he's talking about, I think, is that, look at London. 42% of people who live in London are, like me, foreign-born, right? So there's a very significant immigrant population in London. Obviously, if you have half of a city, essentially, that are people who are first-generation immigrants, that is going to make it less of the local culture. It's just a fact of life, isn't it?
The Russian guy states fairly, I think, that if a significant number of residents of London are born overseas, that simply has to change the local culture of the city to some extent. He doesn't even say for better or worse. It's just a fact, which is met with an immediate no from the presenter, which is kind of odd, as the presenter then says, that's fine, the city has changed. But to say that it's become less English is, according to him, ridiculous. Again, what then is Englishness? If it just doesn't matter where anybody's from, that, London will remain equally English regardless of who's there. Again, the term becomes meaningless. Ridiculous, in fact.
The fact of that is, and you're absolutely right, but the fact of that is that the city has changed. That's fine, it's changed. But to say it's become less English is ridiculous. Either it's a stupid comment,
so let me give you an example.
Well,
either it's a stupid comment or a racist comment. I mean, that's kind of uncharitable, isn't it? To reduce it to stupid or racist. Like, true or false is probably better. And I'll give you a clue. It's true. But no, it's just hectoring with no truth value assigned. It's like, you're stupid or racist. Or both. Why not that? It's stupid and racist. I win.
No, it's not. Well,
It's not just
first of all,
it's
it's nothing to do
racist.
with race. But look at this. Look at it like this: if 50% of the people who lived in London were Scottish, would we be okay to say that it's less English than it was when it was 10%?
We would say it
Would
is
that be
British.
okay? Well, no, but
Dr. Shola intentionally misses the point. We would say it's British. Again, swapping English for British. So being able to cling to, if it's in Britain, it must be British. This is just a pointless tautology.
Do you not consider yourself as English?
no.
Why is that?
Because I'm British.
So
I'm a British.
So when you
Russian
go to
person.
Scotland, if you go to Scotland, so where have you come from? What do you say?
Well, I'd say I live in London. I'm originally from Russia.
But why can't you
It's
say I'm from
complicated.
England?
It's because
Why?
I'm not from England. I
But you
wasn't born.
are.
No, I'm not. I wasn't born here.
Hilariously, the presenter instantly denies this, imploring the Russian guy, why can't you say you're from England? Suffice to say that he himself says he was born and grew up abroad, I'll presume in Russia, and he doesn't claim to be English since he's not. No biggie, he's not English. He's cool with that, I'm cool with that, we're all cool with that. It's fine.
That's where you're from, England. So why
I'm not
can't you
from
just...
England. I wasn't born here. I didn't grow
But you
up
just said
here.
you're from... Are you from London?
No.
Presenter is in freefall now, desperate. Are you from London? Russian guy again. No, I'm not. Presenter immediately interrupts as the Russian guy lays out pretty clearly that he was born elsewhere and grew up elsewhere.
Point.
I am British. I was born here. So if he does not self-identify as British, you're not.
No, I'm
actually-
British, but I'm not English.
But
That's the
he
difference.
is not.
Dr. Shola can't help herself but to interrupt with a non-point. Worse than a non-point, actually. The guy does identify as British, not English. Amazing. Stop the conversation blundering with that. Well done, well done.
Yeah, I don't think it's a racist tweet. I think he's talking about his childhood days, you know, in the 40s, 30s, 40s, 60s, you know.
Yeah,
40s,
yeah, when he was
50s.
younger, yeah.
Yeah, younger days, how England was and how England has changed to now.
But he doesn't like the change.
But hang on, he hasn't said changed.
Another reasonable point from the guy in the end here. Correctly stating that Cleese has some nostalgia for a childhood in a Britain that was a different place. It's reasonable to state and it's reasonable to infer. Well, no, the presenter instantly states that nothing has changed. Or if it has, it's not less English, which is kind of in contradiction to what he said before, that it had changed, then that was fine. So which is it? Has England changed? Has London changed? Then it's fine? Or has nothing changed? And even if it has, it isn't less English. So what is John Cleese moaning about? When people say these things, when they say things like this that are direct contradictions at different points of the conversation, it just shows they're not really working from any principle. They're not working from a core set of this is a thing, this is another thing. They're just saying whatever they can to muddy the waters and to pretty much derail a conversation.
But it's a fact, isn't
I'm
it?
sorry.
Yeah,
please,
but no, that's fine.
Can
It's
we
a
go
fact.
back
But it hasn't
hundreds
become
of
less
years?
English.
Yeah, it has.
No, can we please go back
absolutely
hundreds
has.
of years to, I don't know, the Vikings coming?
Vikings. Dr. Shola comparing the demographic shifts in London, which are fine, which aren't changing anything about it being English, to comparing it to violent raids by Vikings.
Exactly.
To, I don't know, shipping black people during the slave trade.
And we're off the rails, slavery. Slavery has now landed in the middle of this conversation about whether London is as English as it was when all the people that lived there were English.
I don't know, during the time the British Empire colonized other countries. It has not been pure English white skin.
Now Dr. Shola, for some reason, suddenly switches back to the term English in a negative context, in the phrase pure English white skin. How strange. In a kind of garbled point, I assume, about slaves being transported via England, via English soil. By that reasoning, West Africa is now not purely West African due to the presence of European slave traders.
And then he said, I suspect I should apologise for my affection for the Englishness of my upbringing, but in some ways, I found it calmer, more polite, more humorous, less tabloid and less money-oriented than the one that is replacing it.
He's not talking about values, he's not talking about culture, he's talking about people. And that means it's got racist connotations.
Didn't say anything
it's
about people.
bigoted. Of course he did.
Racist! Round of applause. She's won the debate. Now, having just heard Cleese's tweet read out about how he misses the culture and the values, Dr. Scholler states he's not talking about culture and values. It's like, is it possible really to have a conversation or to debate any of this with someone who isn't listening or denies what they're hearing?
Immigrants are not polite? What the heck?
Can we even attempt to find a definition of English that wouldn't be decried as exclusionary? If we have a definition, some people might not fall within that bracket. Some people might, in fact, not be English. And noticing this might cause some people to feel uncomfortable, feel terrible. Now, either English has at least something to do with lineage, customs, like all ethnicities, family ties to the nation that formed on part of the British Isles over the last 1,000 years or more. I think that's a reasonable place to start. Or it's entirely synonymous with British, simply being a UK passport holder, an official designation, just paperwork. I think a short conversation with a Welsh or Scottish person would normally clarify pretty quickly as to whether or not they are English, or they deem themselves English as an ethnicity. They'll tell you whether it's the same as holding a British passport. Of course, we risk an infinite regress of who or even what is it to be Welsh or Scottish, so that's probably a dead end. If simply anyone can be English, then it becomes a meaningless term, and so too does any other ethnic designation. Who's Japanese? Well, anyone. Who's Ghanaian? It doesn't matter. Anyone can be anything, as we're told. Notice, please, dear listener, dear reader, dear viewer, notice, please, and this is quite a separate question than who can be a British citizen or a subject, who can have a British passport, who can fall under the rights and protections of the United Kingdom. Likewise, can I go to Japan and one day naturalize as a Japanese citizen, afforded all the rights of other Japanese citizens? Yes, I think I can. Can I literally become ethnically Japanese, as Japanese as a samurai, as Japanese as Emperor Hirohito? No, I can't. And I'm not going to cry about it. Having said all this, when people actually come to debate this, any of these points are pretty much nowhere to be seen. People are happy to tactically forget this English-British distinction when it suits them. Mr. Cleese states English. London is no longer English. But when arguing the point, the Dr. Scholler lady here, she uses the term British, and just as British as John Cleese. Now, she's quite educated. Take a look at all the certificates and bits of paper she's got from various institutions. She's been in education a lot. So it's reasonable to assume she knows the distinctions in these terms. But for some reason, switches them at will. Call me cynical. It would seem like a tautology to state something like cities in Britain are British, but it's kind of, that's where we've arrived at in this maze, this mess of talking about this. No one arguing the point seems to want to claim their identity as English anyway, more often describing themselves as British, with some caveat or a hyphen. Okay, fine. By my reckoning, this has to be more of a civic as opposed to ethnic sign, ethnic designation. As in, we're all citizens, we're all subjects of the UK. So, why the kickback to stating the fact that self-described English people are a minority in the capital? That's simply a fact. And the recognition that this might mean that London isn't as English as it was before. Why are people so ready to try and either deny this or start calling people names? Start calling people racist? Notice here, the pushback is only given to the two guests who give a reasonable interpretation of John Cleese, suggesting that he's not racist, and is correct in saying that Britain or London has changed. Dr. Scholler, who is entirely critical of John Cleese, is given no pushback at all.